Hey guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. We're trying a new format today, which we are calling Readers Roundtable, where we get some of our bookish friends and ourselves to talk about some of the stuff that we are currently reading or have just previously read. This could be stuff that we didn't think we had enough to talk about to do like a video on its own for you guys for the channel. It could just literally be that we are in the process of reading it and want to talk about it with people. You know that our favorite part about the channel in general is always talking about things with other people. And again, we've talked previously in some of our other Betwixt videos about how we miss talking back and forth at each other because we've done a lot of like dedicated reviews in the last couple of years, and we sort of miss that conversational style. So this is a new format that we're trying out. We're probably gonna hopefully do a couple more in the future as long as this works out and you guys enjoy it and we enjoy doing it. So hopefully you enjoy it. But we have brought friends, which we don't often have. I know, it's lovely.
Michaela, we have other friends.
What? No.
We're always your friends.
Madness. It's good. So yes, we'll introduce all of ourselves. I feel like in case this is your first time on our channel, Gretchen and I will also introduce ourselves. We'll introduce our friends, and then we're just going to be talking a bit about the stuff that we've just read, are currently reading, all of that sort of stuff. And hopefully it's fun. So that's where we're at.
Sounds great, Michaela.
So I'm Gretchen, and my face does a lot of talking on our channel, mostly about romance. And when I don't do romance, I do politics and history, because both of those things go together to make a cohesive channel.
Yeah.
So I it's either naked people or political corruption, I guess, or both. I don't know. Sometimes I find political romances. I'm a little bit loopy right now because it's finals time and I am getting a PhD, as many of you know, and I'm tired. But I'm really, really glad to just be taking a break from the craziness with a bunch of people that I love and talking about books.
Yeah.
So welcome.
If you didn't know, my name's Michaela. I haven't been doing solo videos really for a lot of reasons, but part of it is that the main thing that I have been reading in the last year has been fan fiction, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fan fictions, and I don't know how to do reviews of those for like it feels weird. Like this is a book channel and not a fan fiction channel, so I don't know. I can do videos on that, and I've talked with Gretchen about possibly doing videos on that. So we're gonna yes, okay. So we're gonna test that today. I'm gonna talk about a fan fiction today, but also book stuff that I've been reading.
Michaela thinks that she is the only person who reads this, so
it's not that I'm also only. It's like nobody.
Leave a comment. Tell Michaela she's
y'all
not
might
alone.
not even have heard of fan fiction.
What is fan fiction, really? No, it's more so just that like I'm gonna talk about my particular fan fictions that I care about, and like there's like a niche audience for that, and like other people listening to me gush about characters that I love that they don't necessarily give a shit about is like
Michaela,
no.
Romance or politics? This is already a niche channel.
Fine, we'll make it more niche. When I do read books, I read a lot of horror, a lot of queer lit, and a lot of translated lit. So like that's the stuff that you'll probably hear me talking about when I talk about the other things that I read. But yeah, that's where I'm at. If and when you see my face, that's usually what it's about. Yeah. Taylor, you want to go next?
Oh yeah, it's me. Hi. Yes, I am Taylor. I am a longtime associate of Between the Books in various forms and roles. I am coming from a background in children's lit and library science, having masters in both of those topics, and I work kind of in the cultural history sphere, but like reading wise, I feel like I've always cleaved in very similar directions to Michaela. We like a lot of weird fantasy. I'm drawn to the similar like kind of spooky stuff that she is, even if I don't quite read as much of it. But yeah, I'm very excited to be back and talk about a couple of the short story collections I've been reading through.
And Dan.
And I'm Anne, and I know this lovely group of people because of Gretchen. Gretchen and I worked at the Westfield Athenaeum, and so doing librarian-ish type things, and kvetching about all sorts of other things in the basement during COVID is how we got to know each other. And we did similar sort of program to this, but we called it Librarians Discuss. And we would just come up with topics and sort of, you'd have a group of bookish people talking about a topic. And I guess right now, I'm not exactly sure what I read most of the time. Every time I sort of look at Gretchen's Betwixt and Gretchen's and Michaela's Betwixt channel, I go, oh, romances, I'd forgotten about those. And then I pile up a few and go explore a few more. I end up listening to a lot of YA books, just because I travel back and forth from Western Mass to Boston, and that's a great way to pass time. So that's what I'll be sharing with you today. Though I did also bring a couple of, sort of like Gretchen, I'll pop into nonfiction books, and Gretchen does it much more than I do, but you pick up a serious book and that's about all I can handle. And that's probably why I go read romance novels for a few months and then come back and pick up a heavy book. So that's me, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
I was telling everybody before we started recording that I use Storygraph. And so Storygraph gives you a lot of really great graphs about what you've been reading. And it's the beginning of May, and I have a perfect 50-50 split between fiction and nonfiction right now. And I've maintained that split for like 5 months. And I'm just like weirdly proud of myself for like the perfect graph. So I thought a lot. So the plan here is that we're all going to talk about one book, and we may have some discussion about that book or not. And then we'll move around to the next person. They'll talk about one book, and then we'll go around in a round table, and we'll just keep going and talking about books until we run out of things to talk about, which, knowing these three people, will be never. So buckle up. I want to talk about a serious nonfiction book. I'm really sorry. But the reason is that I'm doing full reviews of all of the romance I've been reading lately on the channel. And I want to give some space to stuff that doesn't often get as much of a review for me. And also, like, it's a running joke, right, that I read a lot of serious nonfiction stuff, but normally it's very history. Sometimes it's political. A lot of them are biographies, some political science. But I have gone down the rabbit hole recently of reading books written by lawyers.
Okay.
Like sort of the procedural drama lawyer books? Or
a little bit, because so I've read a couple in the I read Where Law Ends, which was by one of the investigators and lawyers on the Mueller team for the Mueller probe. I read one called Holding the Line, about a Republican head of the Southern District of New York office under Trump, who had to resist pressure from the Trump administration, who was a Republican. So it was very interesting. Then I read one recently that was about a person who worked for a different law office in New York, who was responsible for the initial indictment of the Trump organization. And right now what I'm reading is a book by the lawyer who is probably most famous. I don't know if y'all watch much Netflix, but he was the lawyer for Michael Peterson in the Staircase Netflix drama, which you should all go watch. There's 13 episodes. This case spans like a decade. It's crazy.
I've seen it. It's good.
Yeah.
The Staircase.
And HBO made a fictionalized version as well. Anyway, this is a really long lead-in to the book that I'm reading right now, which is called American Injustice: Inside Stories from the Underbelly of the Criminal Justice System by David S. Rudolph. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this, because it wasn't I went into all those other lawyer books with a mission, right? I wanted to understand that particular investigation or that particular, because I'm not a lawyer, right? I don't know how law works. But there's a lot of intricacies to that. But this is a person who, over decades and decades of doing civil rights law, particularly for people who have been falsely accused. And the reasons they were falsely accused. He did a lot of work in the South, so much of it is racial, but also people who, abuses of police power. And so instead of it being one like trial or investigation, it's like each chapter is basically like an insight to a different case, and you hear about. And if you had told me that I would have read this many books by lawyers, I would have told you, are you nuts? But I'm really fascinated by this. And I mean, I don't think I need to necessarily say that, we could use some criminal law reform in this country. I don't think but it was just hearing, it's a really, really well written book and really, really engaging and interesting. And I mean, sad, because these are people who lose decades of their lives being wrongfully accused, for at times really asinine reasons that they were, incarcerated. So yeah, it's not very uplifting, but it's sometimes when like people are like lawyers and then they write a book, it's like, it was very clear you are not a writer, my friend. Yeehaw. But David Rudolph in particular, he's just like, he could write fiction, I think. So it's just been really interesting. And it's an audiobook too. So being able to follow all these individual stories in a very engaging style, just I'm like, can't put it down.
How wide of a range are these stories from? Because when you were listing your earlier ones, which are like Trump administration era things, like I wonder if there's enough distance there to really have, an objective look, while at the same time that proximity allows you to have a lot more details. For the examples being pulled in from this, like how do you feel like this timeline is, I guess, looking in terms of like present concerns, but then also just like how long these things take?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, for some of these people who he's gotten or helped to get justice for, like he doesn't necessarily work for like the Innocence Project. A lot of times he's brought in after the person has already been proven to be innocent, and then he litigates the civil case to get them restitution. A lot of the time that's where he's brought in, not always, but some of these cases, these people, they were behind bars for 17, 20 years. They went in as 20-year-olds and come out as middle-aged men. All of the examples in the book so far have been men. I still got 2 hours to go. But I think what he has done really well, particularly in this one, is like he starts off with like one of his first cases that really brought him into this kind of law. And then he brings it through, to more recent cases. And I think, because one of his points with his earlier case, right, is that law in the South was very different then. And now, is it different? Yes. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so
that,
I think,
like, line of continuity being so distinct in these cases.
Yeah. And then bringing up later towards the end too, the science behind like DNA versus fingerprint versus hair. And like, that's very relatively new.
Sure.
And he really troubles that as well. So again, not uplifting, but really well written.
It's interesting to me that you're enjoying, I mean, I guess the first couple were like very politically motivated, but like you fought me on trying to get you to read a true crime book. And it's like, you like the law aspect of it, not so much the crime aspect.
Okay, wait, have we not discussed this? Because my therapist is really concerned by my last 6-month turn to the true crime genre.
Oh, what has happened?
I have literally watched Netflix out of true crime dramas, like the documentaries, and like my therapist was like, "So is this new for you?" And I was like, "This is very new." And they were like, "Have you considered that that's a problem?" The more dental surgeries I watch, the more gruesome crime. So no, we can revisit that if you want, because
okay.
I still can't really do like horror. And John was actually just laughing about this. He's like, you refuse to watch a horror movie, and then I'm like, I turn around and you're like watching about a documentary about a gruesome child murder, and I'm like,
See, Isaac is the same way, where I was listening to a true crime podcast and he's like, I don't like listening to this because it's real and it makes me angry. Like, it makes him very mad to listen to like these horrible things that have happened to real
Sure.
people. But he
Right.
can watch a horror movie any day and be fine because it's like fake. Like, fake
Yeah,
violence
that's the way that
is
makes
different.
sense.
Yeah.
Please don't ask my brain why it went the other way.
Yeah, no, I can't actually handle like video documentaries for a lot of these things. Like Michaela, we listen to a lot of like similar true crime podcasts.
Yeah.
And like I can handle it in an audio format.
Also,
But
because a lot
like
of them are like mildly comedy based to alleviate a bit of
there's
that.
comedy, they're bringing in aliens and things like that. There are palate cleansers. And then there's like historical distance when you're looking at, you know, events like the Donner Party or all of those things. But like I just, I guess the thought of, I personally struggle with the documentaries of standard true crime that I like am used to learning about, but it's, I guess,
Huh.
interesting to look at the different layers of engagement that are happening there.
It's funny for me as someone who, like, my undergrad degree, the second part of it was like very like I did bioamp,
Corpse-based?
so it was very corpse based. It was very
Human
long.
remains, technically,
Yeah, like
at that
it was
stage.
crime based, and also because I grew up watching like true crime shows, like that was like one of the like as a kid I was watching those and enjoying them and finding them fascinating, and I still as an adult find that fascinating, and it's part of the reason why I think I like horror and things like that too, is that I've just always been a little bit of like a macabre kid. I don't know. My mom hated it. I was a kid who brought home like I think probably like a dead animal's jawbone and like cleaned it with my toothbrush at like 7 years old, and my mom was like, why are you doing this? And I was like, look how cool it is. That's me. So it's just really interesting to me to hear you talk about this when I was like, let's do a true crime book. And Gretchen was like, no, never. You're never gonna get it.
To be fair, the one true crime book you got me to read, which y'all can go see, we did a joint review of it, and then I watched the documentary on HBO. I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, is probably one of my favorite books I've ever read, and one of the best documentary adaptations of a book I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I will stand by that. So to be fair.
Interesting. Yeah.
Pat self on back. Glad to recommend it.
Lovely circle there.
All right. In a completely like genre shift, I'm gonna talk about fan fiction. So, people who don't know, hi, I'm Michaela. I have probably an unhealthy obsession with Steve and Eddie from Stranger Things. They're back there, flanked by Barb and Dustin. As you would expect from the two boys, we are making them gay, even though one of them is queer-coded and the other one is not, and is probably canonically straight, but like we like to think of the man as bisexual. That would be way more interesting of him. He has a character arc. So I read a lot of fan fictions that have to do with Steve and Eddie. That's like where my brain is at. You can find them on my water bottle. I write a fan fiction. I'm working on it of them as well. But today I finished up one that is 120,000 words. So novel length, long novel length as well. That's like very long. 16 chapters. It's called Someone Else's Favorite Song. The person who published it is fastcar.mp3, and it's on Archive of Our Own. So I can link that down below if anybody is interested when I'm done talking about it. There have been 3 fics, including this one, that have made me cry. It's hard to make me cry in a book. I cry really easily when it comes to seeing another person sad, but when I'm like reading something, I have enough distance not to make me cry. And there have been 3 fics that have made me cry. This is one of them. This fic focuses, I want to say 3 years after the events of season 4 of Stranger Things, if you have seen that. Steve and Robin have an apartment in a town 45 minutes from Hawkins where Robin is going to college and Nancy is also going to college. There's background Robin and Nancy also being a couple, which is interesting, and I kind of enjoy the look at that. Robin is canonically gay in the show. Nancy is not. Nancy is straight in the show, but again, we love a bisexual. Just put that out there. Eddie has also been relocated there because in the events of Stranger Things season 4, he was basically accused of ritualistic murders in Satanic Panic style stuff as a metalhead D&D player in the 80s. Got relocated there. So they're all there. And it follows in the first chapter, Steve's mom dies, and Steve is 21 years old. And so this fic is very much focused in grief and how we handle it. There is a scene where this character, who very much in the whole show is like a rock to all of these other characters who are experiencing a lot of emotional trauma, and he's part comedic relief and also just like doesn't get a chance to break down. Watching a character break down who has like a very different face, and watching the characters who care about him see that happen to him and not knowing what to do, because Steve does not ask for help. Steve is the help. People go to Steve for help. So it was very like painful to like see that happen to that character, and also to see these other characters struggle with how to help him. Clearly having an emotional breakdown, because the loss of your mother is no small thing. And also because Steve has a very interesting relationship with his parents, which is that all we know about Steve's parents in the show is that they're never around, because he's a rich kid who's home alone all the time. He can throw parties constantly. They're just not there. And that his dad is an asshole. So that's all that we get out of Steve's parents canonically. And people like to do things differently based on how they feel that might be. But I loved it. It was so good. It was very cathartic. You have this slow burn romance between Steve and Eddie, who had been friends with benefits for a year at the start of this fic, but like no strings attached. And through Eddie being kind of Steve's rock, he falls in love with Eddie, and Eddie realizes that he's in love with Steve, but wants to run from that because he has trust issues, as one does. It also discusses Steve had like a kiss with a boy who ended up being sent to a conversion camp when they were caught kissing, and that character committed suicide. It's not a canon character at all, but like you have this like trauma that Steve has around being in a relationship with a guy because he feels like he caused the death of this other character. Like if he didn't exist, then that wouldn't have happened. So there's a lot of trauma there. It was just it was very well written. I loved it. It was great.
I like how you were like, hey, in a major genre shift, but also it's all trauma.
Have you seen Stranger Things? It's all trauma. It's a horror sci-fi show, so like it has to be in there, man. And also it's about gay kids in the 80s, so like what are you gonna do?
I mean, I guess that's where I'm wondering, because like there isn't a ton of queer actually, or at least in the first 2 seasons, which is all I feel like I know. But like your discussion of the summary with Eddie, and this kind of reimagining these characters as bisexual or queer in ways that they weren't. And like, if you've read 3 in this section, are the same factors bringing you and these authors in all these cases? Like the appeal of the era, those aspects of like the satanic panic, and like a queer undercurrent in culture that isn't allowed to like really be shown in all cases. Is that what you found?
So the fandom is very interesting because Eddie doesn't get to be openly queer on the show, but he has a black hanky in his pocket, which people who are queer in the 80s are like, hanky code, my guy is gay. And
it
also,
is a deliberate signal.
Yes. And also,
Okay.
he's just quite flamboyant. There's active flirting that happens on screen. Eddie calls Steve big boy at one point, which like everybody who's gay is like, there he is. He's flirting with the boy. So that's there. Robin is canonically gay. There's a scene in season 3 where Robin comes out to Steve, and Steve has this reaction of like, oh, because in that scene, he had said like he admitted feelings for Robin, and then Robin and him end up being best friends. So there's this one canon queer character that's there that has brought a lot of queer folks to the show, I think in part because of that. And then Eddie being like quite obviously queer coded, even if he never like verbalizes that he's queer in any way. Is there the reason I think that people enjoy Steve possibly being queer is because it would be interesting for his character arc. In season 1, he calls Jonathan, I think, the F slur. And then by season 3 and season 4, he's best friends with somebody who like his season 1 character would have like literally bullied into the ground. So like there's like this arc of like understanding oneself, understanding and being more empathetic and stuff. So like it makes sense for Steve's character journey that if he sort of accept elements in himself where he too might not be 100% straight. I also run under the, and I think a lot of people do, under the thing of like more people are queer than is obvious. Like it's a spectrum, and like this one character who they're foils to each other. They're very interesting. The uptight jock popular kid who's like very focused on his appearance and very focused on how people perceive him, to this outcast, very vocally counterculture, plays D&D, just loves the stuff he loves out loud character. Like they interact in ways that are very interesting as well. So but they're both goofballs and funny, and like you love them.
You can definitely see the charm in that aspect, but that was a really interesting, I didn't know, I mean, half of that stuff from the more recent things.
Will is also canonically queer in the show based on season 4 is, I think, the other thing too. So Will,
they seem to leave a lot of it just as like not terribly significant to the narrative, but just like
it's significant to Will's narrative in season 4.
I don't want to sell anything short, but it's clear they're trying to live a little more fully in these stories.
Yes, yeah, I think I don't know. We don't know whether the TV show is going to do anything justice, but that's why you go to fan fiction, right? Is that
is it still going?
Yeah, there's one more season.
I'm clueless.
There's one more season left to do. So, yeah.
Wow.
Fan fiction's fun. It's worthwhile.
And Michaela's like, I don't know if I have anything to say about it. I don't know if I can make
I have a lot
video.
to say. I have so much to say. I just don't know if anybody would listen. That's the
We are
problem.
listening. I have never, the only reason I've watched one episode of the show because you made me. And I'm interested. Right. I'm just saying, I'm here for the support of Michaela making fan fiction videos.
I think it would be really cool because I think a lot of people have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
There are millions of people who have no idea what fan fiction is or that it even exists. So
it's free. It feels weird to like rate fan fiction because it's not like monetized or anything. Like it's hard to talk about. Like it doesn't feel right to do like a review in the same way that you would for a book. Because it doesn't hold the same weight. These people aren't making money off of it, and they can't because of the nature of it. It's just people really loving characters. And yeah, sure, a lot of it is amateurish. There's not gonna be like, of all of the fan fictions I've read, there's like not as many where I'm like, this is beautiful and I loved it. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, you don't even understand how to write, but I enjoyed watching this fun romp. This was fine. It was like 4,000 words. I can deal with that. That's easy. But
and when you're viewing them in aggregate, then you can really be engaging with it as like literary criticism, both on your part, but then also seeing how these, you know, reinterpretations are occurring.
But character development, I mean, is one of the vital things when we, at least, you know, for some people, the development of characters. So how many people have thought, you know, Romeo and Juliet should have ended differently, or, you know, Shakespeare, you know, there are plays in which a different story is told from the original within the play. So fan fiction per se, as an idea, has been going on for a really long time, even if nobody's written it.
Gretchen and I did a whole video that people can go watch where we talked about how retellings are fan fiction. All retellings you have ever read are fan fiction.
And that pretty much means that everything is fan fiction if we're, you know, making it end a little bit differently than the original did, or a lot differently per se. So I think it would be fascinating. I really think we should do more fan fiction because I think, you know, that's how you learn something new. I mean, the gazillions of things we learned, you know, through, you know, talking to other people and whatnot of books or librarians discuss or whatever. I mean, that's where all of a sudden you go, oh, let me go find one of those and read some.
Yeah, I'll recommend it. And even people who like don't necessarily know the characters, some of these that I've read, I feel like you could read them on their own as their own thing. They exist in their own worlds. Like it's helpful to understand sort of where the characters are coming from, but not necessarily necessary.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Taylor,
Well,
you want to go? What do you want to
Yeah,
talk
it makes
about?
a wonderful transition into folklore fan fiction. So this is Kelly Link's new book of short stories. It's called White Cat, Black Dog, and it contains retellings of traditional, like not really traditional folklore, usually literary fairy tales of a sort. There's a lot of work from the Brothers Grimm, so those definitely being more originally from the oral tradition, but then others being pulled. Tam Lin is the story I just finished reading today, and so that was pulled from the Scottish ballad. And so already you have each of these stories kind of taking Kelly Link's familiar contemporary kind of fabulous world building. There's not really fixed natures to any of her settings or like how the world functions. Sometimes you get those little bits of magic more evidently than others. And other times it's really remarkable how easily she brings in these elements of like the world of fairy and things like that in those systems. So I'm about halfway. No, I've got like 2 stories left in this. I just think, I am a long-term fan of Kelly Link. She does some fantastic short fiction. She's in the process of working on a novel. I wasn't actually expecting these books because I thought that was the next thing to come. And then this kind of fell into my lap. So I don't know what to say too much about any of them, except that, like, they are gorgeous, they are funny in all those ways, but perhaps structure is the place to talk about it, because if you haven't any experience with Kelly Link, you might know that like her story structure can sometimes be polarizing. And some stories have more of a tendency to cut off abruptly or to really stretch out in certain ways and not focus entirely on answering every topic or question or uncertainty that has been set up. This, I think, while that is certainly a valid criticism in other places and not necessarily one I agree with, I think these story structures are really accessible for someone who hasn't, gotten into Kelly Link before, even if you haven't read any of the particular stories. I think they are all doing such unique things in their own right that it's really really a fantastic experience. I haven't had the brain focus to do any sort of long-term fiction recently. Like I drop a lot of books after the first couple pages just because I can't really do the whole process. So it's been nice going back to short stories for the first time in a while and being able to actually like get that whole experience and actually feel like I'm using my brain. And having just finished a library information sciences degree, I haven't been using my brain in the ways I've been wanting to.
No, just memorize the acronyms. The reason I started laughing like at multiple points during what Taylor was talking about is that longtime watchers may know that this channel didn't start as Betwixt the Books. This channel started as Bibliomancy for Beginners because again, alliteration is key here. And that was a book club that some of the members changed out as the years went by, but it was always me, Michaela, and Taylor. And there is a whole hour-long discussion that in our far backlog that you can watch of us discussing Kelly Link's collection, Magic for Beginners, us and our baby faces.
As well as I think a video where just Taylor and I talked about getting in trouble. Possibly.
Oh yeah, I think that happened
any
too.
opportunity we have.
Yeah. And I it's not quite magical realism, right? Because magical realism has like a lot of like cultural connotations.
Yeah, it's why I used fabulism in my intro, but that's not a word that I think Kelly Link has ever used to describe her own style.
I just feel like because Taylor and I also just have like a wonderful like antagonist relationship in those videos that like only moderately exists in real life. But I think
it was getting too real. We had to step away from it.
Yeah, we had to stop. But Kelly, I like Fabulous as well because it's just those stories do not read in the way that you might expect. If you're ready for like prose in a sentence form that you are used to, that is like not Kelly Link.
No, you just
Like-
need to be ready for whatever. Down.
A unique
Go
voice,
with
I
it.
suppose.
Just enjoy. It's a good ride.
And honestly, it's interesting the way you bring that up, because especially like when looking at the Tam Lin story, which is a girl falling in love with a human who's kind of been held by their word in the fairy court. Adaptations people might be familiar with is Holly Black's Tithe young adult novel, which is also taken from the same story. And there's just sort of that assumption in the mindset that one can exist in the world and in the fairy world, and that these two places are intermingled and accessible by rules, but not necessarily comprehensible. And that is a way Kelly Link just chooses to approach stories in a lot of cases. Like you see those elements in her original work of like the near fairy, and it is a little jarring in stories that are set in our present day, in our world, and familiar aspects, when they do just have so many things where you're like, I don't understand whether I should be taking this literally, figuratively, or someplace in between. And I think that does really work in this collection, because it is both echoing that more traditional style of the story.
Yeah.
And no second part to that both.
Wow. I think I'll leave now, and I need to go get the book. You guys can continue without.
I read the first story of that aloud to Taylor and Taylor's fiance Emily, and so like I can also say that I've been enjoying it. I've been reading through it as well. But Taylor and I both like Kelly Link, so like,
yeah. I honestly can't wait. I mean, this is why I find talking to people about books is just fascinating.
She is also a local to the area. She co-operates a bookstore in East Hampton.
Ah, cool.
Book Moon Books, which everyone should go to. That's where I got this. Yeah. And they gave us cookies.
Well, now
okay, I'm sorry. Now I have to go because they're giving cookies elsewhere.
That's awesome. I honestly can't wait. I mean, it sounds fascinating.
Oh, it's a delight. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you like fairy tales, if you're like a person who enjoys portal fantasy, or I would also say like people who like weird books, like The Blue Girl by Laurie Foos. I'm not positive. Like things that just like weird magical stuff is happening and it is not explained, and everybody's treating it like it's normal, and you're like, what?
But it is all devastatingly beautiful and ringing true as you read it.
It has a reason. It does, but it's just not explained to you. If you don't like that, maybe don't read Kelly Link. But if you're down for that, give her a try. It's good.
No, I can't. I honestly can't wait. There's an author, a Southern author called Sarah Addison Allen, who wrote a book called Garden Spells eons ago. I honestly don't remember when it came out, but it had a similar thing. The world that she described or created was so different. There were parts of it that were very similar and familiar, but then there are things happening and you're going like, wait, that just doesn't happen. That's not the way things work.
Well, Anne, I was thinking about you too and your YA thing, because we did two different ones that were a similar-ish style. The Laura Ruby B one.
Right.
And then
Bone Gap.
The Bone Gap, yeah, it has a V on the cover.
Yeah.
And then the one, wasn't it like set in like Puerto Rico or something? There was something with a garden.
Oh, Fierce and Subtle Poison.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were both YA books that we did in a similar vein. And I'm pretty sure at that point, Taylor and Michaela were picking them just to watch the steam come out of my ears.
It's not that.
One
it's
I just
that we enjoy.
Cover.
We enjoy this style of writing. I love Bone Gap was 5 stars for me, and nobody else liked it as much as I did. And I think both of you liked Fierce and Subtle Poison more than I did. So
Bone Gap was also very memorable, though. I found that fascinating. That was with the character with face blindness, amongst other things.
Yeah,
and I realized suddenly that's almost a spoiler, because you go through rather a lot of the book without really quite understanding certain aspects of the writing.
Yeah.
No, wonderful books to discuss. I liked all of those.
Cool. Now I have podcasts to go back and listen to too. Like, I thought this was going to be easy.
Well,
Homework
here,
Some
was
homework.
here, Anne, talk about your book so that we can have things that we need to go search out.
Yes, absolutely. Come on.
Well, I will do what I'm sort of in the middle of. There is a book by Talia Hibbert.
Mhm.
It's a YA book, and it's highly suspicious and unfairly cute. And it's basically a, friends or enemies, former friends to enemies to friends to question mark is how far I've gotten. We can fill in however far you want to keep going with that. But I also, the reason that it just sort of captured me, I'm listening to it and I've been traveling back and forth to Boston. But it's kept my interest going, even to the point where I barely even noticed when someone rear-ended me in the car on the bike.
No. Are you
No.
okay?
No.
Is the bike okay?
No, no bike. The book kept going. No, it was stop and go traffic, and it had nothing to do with the book I was listening to. But it took me a moment to turn it off properly. But anyway, the book, I find this particular telling, and I'm halfway through, so I've literally gotten to, they're just at the point where they've become friends. It's just about to go somewhere else, and then I had to stop, and we'll see what happens. But, we can probably get it. I'm halfway through, so, there's still going to be some sort of conflict coming up where they're going to not be friends again, and then in the end, if we follow the usual sort of trope, particularly, YA trope, will be happily ever after by the last page. But I liked this because the author has done a really nice job of sort of introducing characters who are not neurotypical. One of them has OCD, and the other character just has I'm sure there's an official term for it, but she's not scared about yelling at someone for doing something, wrong, or that she thinks is wrong. But there's sort of a social just divergency to what you would expect, typically of someone who's a teenager. And I don't know, this author has done a really nice job. It sort of got introduced without getting officially introduced, and it sort of weaves itself in, and you suddenly start seeing it before the other characters do. I don't know, it's just really, really well done. And again, I'm listening to it on an audiobook, and for some reason, whoever they have chosen for the reading has done a good job with each character. So you've got a male author or a male reader and a female reader, and it's just well balanced. So I don't know, I'd love to have other people read it just to see what they think, because they're not divergencies that I'm very familiar with, but I love, this is how I learn stuff. I go to YA books and open them up and say, this is something I don't know enough about. And then I go on a rabbit hole, as we say. And it's like, I have stuff to learn about. So
if you haven't, Anne, John Green's most recent YA book, Turtles All the Way Down, also has a protagonist who has OCD, and specifically like cyclical thought OCD, where they get like stuck in spiral thought patterns, which is very interesting to read, and it's something that John Green himself suffers with, so it was like very personal to him. I read that a couple years ago and really enjoyed it, and it does also have that thing where I think it's going to help young people sort of be a little bit more empathetic to some of the sort of weirder people in their school or around them, and be like, this is what some people's brains look like this is what it's like to have to function like a normal human in society when this is happening inside of you constantly. It's like very interesting and a good one. So yeah, if you want to read more like that, and it's also YA obviously, so yeah, Turtles All the Way Down is a good.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Like I said, I find this just interesting. It feels, I've listened to odds and ends of, YA romances, and most of them are, it's like, here's another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Very
this one
formulaic.
but this one's just, there's other stuff going on in this one, and well enough done that at least halfway through the book, I would say, give it a shot. I mean, I'd love to give it to someone who suffers from OCD, or, for someone for whom it would make more, immediate impact. So, I don't know. I'll let you know.
It was interesting. So like that one was, for people who don't know, hi, I work for Barnes & Noble. That was Barnes & Noble's YA monthly pick, I think, for January. And it was our lowest selling YA monthly pick ever. At least in my store. And I could not tell you why, because Talia Hibbert is such a popular adult romance author. And I don't know if it's just because it was like her first YA pick. I don't know if it's because most of the YA picks that I feel like do really well are sci-fi fantasy, and this one is obviously like fiction and romance. Or if it was January, because obviously January is a slower month in general. So like that also is kind of harmful to it, or not helpful at the very least.
Right. Yeah.
Hi, Gretchen.
Hi. Anne, have you read any other Talia Hibbert?
Not that I know of. Very possibly have, but my memory of connecting authors and books that I've read is sadly wanting.
So I've read 6. 7.
Of course you have, Gretchen.
Okay.
Politics and romance.
Well, so here I was so happy you brought that up, because so I tried to read one of her earlier series. And it was very like cliche, like dark romance, like BDSM, like dom sub situation, and it went over the hill so fast for me. I was like, oh, I never want to pick up this author ever again. But then I just so happened, I was like on a Libby browse at like 3 a.m.
Right.
And I saw this other series by her, and I was like, I think it had like a second chance romance trope was the first one. And for those who don't know, if it says second chance romance, just give it to me. Just give it to me. I will read it. And those were so good. It blew me out of the water. But then I think what Talia Hibbert is most famous for,
Did the Chloe Brown, something Brown sisters or something like that series? Get a Life, Chloe Brown. That's what my brain is telling me. I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah. I just couldn't get into those. So it's just like really, I don't know. I would just be really fascinated to see, how it compares, because Michaela and I, we're also talking about, YA and adult authors transitioning to YA or vice versa. But also like, there's also been like a thing going on right now about how like adult romances and YA romances are both getting that like cartoony art treatment.
Yes.
And sometimes you can't tell them apart.
Mm-hmm.
And if me, as like a person who knows that Talia Hibbert writes adult romances, like I could be like, what are you trying, like, am I going to let my kid read this?
Yes. Yeah, that's fair.
Like you might not be able to tell the difference.
Yeah. The cover was very neutral of like a regular contemporary romance. Like it looks like a contemporary romance.
Yeah, it did. My interest is to have, whether this, like if someone read it who was not, at the over the hill age that we all are, are there characters that are this sort of accepting and smart and capable of seeing their own flaws, and it may be unrealistic, but I'm still having I'm going to keep going, so but it would be fun to find out. I would love to have, I'd love to, what a teenager thinks of this and going like, this was written by an adult who doesn't really know what it's like to be a teenager.
That's totally fair.
Yeah. And I don't know, but that's just, I have a suspicion that it might be.
Well, I mean, some YA, I think there's like a goodness to it when it's like aspirational, right? Whereas you as like, I know I would read them as a teen and just be like, okay, I do not have any of this figured out. And then like you see like a character who's like able to like process things or like get through things, and you're like, oh, it's possible, right?
Sure.
As much as there is also a benefit to YA that is also like the character is a mess. Because like if all you're reading, right, is these perfect, like, I can function, and you're like, what?
It can be like the narratives can be much more rooted in, I guess, that person and that just kind of growth. To just, I guess, jump back slightly early into the conversation when, Anne, you were mentioning like the voice and like the space that this book takes to try to explore different, like, I guess, I've lost all the specific words, but to just different existences, ways people would differently approach, the thing, and how, I don't know why I can't remember of these words we've been using, but like to
Neurodivergence.
Thank you. Neurodivergence
There
is
you
exactly the shorthand we need. I think that's really interesting and a really fantastic part about YA, that it's kind of allowed to do that.
Right.
Whereas in adult fiction, I feel like if there is a book trying to make a project out of exploring these points of view, then it inherently becomes something more like literary fiction. Like
Right.
it is in
Right.
a way like framed as inaccessible deliberately. Whereas YA taking on those projects is much more trying to immerse in that, perhaps.
Yeah.
And romance too, I think. And I mean, I know, Anne, you haven't finished it yet, so maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse. But I had a really good spate of romances that didn't do this, but I have noticed that there's like this trend in adult romance where they introduce a character with some kind of neurodivergence. But it's fine because it can all be fixed with the power of love. And you're just like,
Right.
No.
And I like I
Yeah.
said, I haven't read one of those in a while, so I couldn't even point to one. And I have had a couple recently where it's, they learn to work with it and around it and together,
right.
which is like the actual way. But like, there's just a lot of romance that is like, it's okay, you will be fixed by love.
Yeah, and this story isn't that. I mean, that's of all the things that it isn't. These people, they may or are in the process of figuring out how to work with, what's up with them. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. But again, right now I feel like we need to add a few more spots and add some, 16, 17, 14, 13-year-olds and see what they say about the adults or the books that adults write for kids. I think it's an interesting.
Do you have a quick question, like to kind of complicate that? Do we see these examples as being kind of in contrast or still kind of within the larger project of like young adult romances involving also terminal illnesses? Which is a trend that we are still seeing in this moment of a lot of books being released. I think,
I mean, OCD isn't a terminal illness.
No, but in the way that Gretchen's example of like, you are cured of your... whatever, like...
There's a booktuber that I really love named Jen Campbell who has a deformity, and she talks a lot about how she has a hard time picking up books where there are characters with physical deformities because they are either the villain, or B, their physical deformities get fixed often with magic, and it's like it would be
inevitably doomed to die, and that it is like
yeah.
learning to mourn these people who are not meant to be in this world for long.
So it's definitely a pervasive problem in the industry. I don't know that it's going to have any changes.
They just seem like they function in very similar ways, even if I don't feel the same about all of them.
I can't. I'm looking forward to finishing the book, and I can report back later.
Yeah.
In this book, just in reference to this one,
everything is going to be different. Yes, that is an episode of its own.
I mean, John Green's I Can Talk because I finished that one. Definitely didn't fix her. It's not a romance. John Green writes. So there's like some romantic elements because it's still YA, but it's not a romance. But yeah, it doesn't
John
fix
Green
her.
is also responsible for A Fault in Our Stars.
A perfect counterpoint of a book.
Exactly. Interesting. Yeah. So that's what I'm in the middle of right now, since that was the assignment.
You'll folks, I hope you enjoyed this because we enjoyed it, I feel like, and hopefully we'll do it again. I'm gonna wrap it up. I know Gretchen normally wraps it up, but I'm gonna wrap it up because I'm over here.
I was like, you can't take
Too
my...
late. I'm taking your shit. I'm taking it because I have the copy of the book in question. And the next thing that you're going to see from us is either a live show or a recording of a discussion where Taylor will be coming back again, because it will have been the 10-year anniversary of our very first video ever, where we will be revisiting the book we read 10 years ago, called The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. I am holding a copy of the book that has been published in a middle grade format for young children, and the original copy that we read 10 years ago was published for adults in the adult mystery section. So that will be interesting for us to see.
Yeah.
What has happened to this book in 10 years? Have our thoughts on it changed? Has the book itself changed? Because again, this was republished, I think, last year.
So we don't know
For
if there were
kids.
like actual changes.
Yes,
made.
I'm hoping to get a copy of the original book as well to see if it was edited to be made for kids.
Well, because it was a huge part of our original discussion, because
Yes.
the main character is 12, I
Yes.
believe. But it was when we read it, an adult fiction book.
Yes.
And we discussed that there were significant reasons for that, but now apparently
Maybe
those
not.
reasons have disappeared.
Maybe not. No.
Mhm.
We'll see. So yeah, that will be happening shortly. Do you want to actually finish it out, Gretchen? I'll let you. I don't want to steal your thunder. What do you have coming up on the channel?
Anyway, so we are so excited to have Taylor back with us. Like Michaela said, you're coming up on 10 years of this channel. Obviously, Taylor was there in the beginning. The reason that we started this was because we all met freshman year of college and said, hey, I really like these people and I really like talking books with them. And it's really amazing to think that 10 years later, we all still like each other. And, we still hang out, we still talk about books. And it's just been something that, we started way back when, and it has continued through like so many other events in our lives. So it'd be really great to revisit that and keep that going. If you guys saw, I did a romance arc TBR a couple of weeks ago, basically telling you that I had 18 straight weeks of arcs that I'm supposed to be getting through. I do not have a free Monday until September. And so far I am doing it. So I have a new review of the latest Christina Lauren book that is coming. And then I'm really excited to share with you guys the last book in the Gilded Heiresses series by Harper St. George. I don't do a lot of historical romance on the channel anymore, but this is a very feminist historical romance that involves suffragettes, and it's a whole thing. And I really like it. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about that. And I'm confident we can do at least 3 of 18, which is a great ratio. So we'll see what happens after that. So thank you so much again to Anne and Taylor for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed this content. Again, we do hope to make this a fairly regular thing, and we hope to do it live maybe next time so that you all can discuss with us. Seemed to me this worked out pretty perfectly, where we all got to talk about one book and have a really great discussion. And I think we all added some new things to our TBR. So I think this went well. And really, it's just me and Michaela's opinion that matters here. So thank you so much to everybody for your time. And whatever it is you're reading, I hope you enjoy it, because there's just so many books out there. It's always a good time to be reading. Thanks, guys. Bye.